My sister punched me in the stomach when I was 7 months pregnant. In that moment, I thought I had lost everything, but she had no idea what would happen next. She screamed first. I couldn't. The air seemed to vanish from the room. Everything around me went muffled, as if someone had suddenly turned off the sound in my life. The only thing I felt was pain. Sharp, animalistic, piercing, and fear. The most terrifying fear of my life. My hand instinctively moved to my stomach. "Please," I whispered, not knowing exactly who I was speaking to, myself, the baby, or God. And then came the silence. The kind of silence that was never supposed to happen. My daughter wasn't moving. It was a day that was supposed to be happy. My mother's birthday, 60 years old, a jubilee. The house was decorated with balloons, the table was heavy with food, guests were laughing, music played in the background. Everything looked perfect, like a picture. But inside, I was completely tense, because she was there. My younger sister, Christina. Since childhood, she knew how to turn any event into a battlefield. But this time, it was different. It was worse. Much worse. That morning, I woke up early. The sun gently filtered into the bedroom, lighting up the bright walls of our house. I lay on my side, carefully holding my stomach. "Good morning, little one," I said softly, and felt a light movement. I smiled. It was the best feeling in the world. My husband, Daniel, was already in the kitchen. The smell of fresh coffee filled the house. He always got up earlier, always cared, always stood by my side. When I walked in, he looked at me and smiled. "You look especially beautiful today." I rolled my eyes but smiled back. "I'm pregnant, Daniel. That doesn't count." He walked over, gently hugged me, and placed his hand on my stomach. "It counts, always." But then his face grew serious. "Will she be there?" I nodded. He let out a heavy sigh. "If she starts again, we leave, immediately. It's Mom's birthday." "I don't care," he said firmly. "I won't let anyone hurt you." I agreed, but deep down I hoped everything would go smoothly. That just for once, she could be normal. But I was wrong. From the first minutes we entered the house, I felt her gaze. Cold, evaluating, hateful. She stood by the window with a glass of wine, staring right at me. "Well, look at that," she said loudly. "Our princess decided to show up." Some guests laughed awkwardly. I ignored it. "Hi, Christina." "Oh, so you actually greet people now? How sweet." I clenched my teeth. For Mom's sake, only for her. Everything went relatively smoothly for about 40 minutes, until Christina started drinking more and talking more. "You think you're better than us, don't you?" she suddenly said at the table. Silence. Everyone froze. "Christina, stop," Mom said softly. "No, really." She stood up. "Look at her. The house, the rich husband, the perfect life." I took a deep breath. I never thought that way. "Oh, really?" She stepped closer. Too close. "You forgot where you came from." "I haven't forgotten anything." "Then why aren't you a part of this family anymore?" It was unfair, and she knew it. "I am here," I said calmly. "No, you're only here in body." Her gaze dropped to my stomach, and in that moment, everything changed. "Did you even decide to use a baby just to look better? Christina, or what?" And then it happened. So fast that I didn't have time to react. She shoved me, right in the stomach. I stumbled back. The world collapsed. Then came the pain and the silence. But unlike her, I wasn't alone. "Enough." Daniel's voice rang out so sharply that everyone fell silent. He walked over, slowly, calmly. But there was something in his eyes that made even Christina take a step back. "You have just committed a crime." She laughed, nervously. "Oh, come on now." "Assault on a pregnant woman," he continued, "with intent to harm, in front of witnesses." The silence turned ice cold. "You don't understand," she whispered. "No, it's you who doesn't understand." He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "The police are already on their way." And in that moment, her confidence vanished, completely. Are you serious?" "Absolutely." I stood there, holding my stomach, and suddenly, I felt it, a faint but definitive movement. Tears streamed down my face on their own. She was alive. Nothing else mattered anymore. 10 minutes later, officers entered the house. 20 minutes later, Christina was led out in handcuffs. She screamed, cried, blamed everyone, but no one was listening to her anymore. That evening, I lost a sister, but I saved my daughter. Sometimes family isn't the people you grew up with, it's the people who are ready to protect you at any cost. The door closed behind the police. And for the first time all evening, the house became truly quiet. Not that tense silence from before, but an empty, scorched silence. as if all the air had been carried out of the house along with Christina. I sat on the couch, still pressing my hands to my stomach. Daniel stood next to me, not moving a single step away. "We need to go to the hospital," he said softly but firmly. I nodded. Now that it was over, the fear returned, even stronger. In the car, I didn't say a word. I stared out the window but saw nothing. Every second felt like an eternity. Every movement inside was a question. Is she still there? Is she okay? "Hey," Daniel gently took my hand. "Everything is going to be fine." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But after that blow, I wasn't sure of anything anymore. In the emergency room, they admitted us immediately. Pregnancy is a priority. I was placed on a gurney and wheeled down a long corridor under bright lights. The smell of antiseptic, voices, footsteps, everything blurred into one stream. "We're going to do an ultrasound right now," the doctor said. "Please," I whispered. "Tell me right away." She looked into my eyes and nodded. The gel was cold. The machine was too loud. My heart was beating too fast. 1 second, 2, 3. And then a sound. Steady, clear, strong, a heartbeat. I closed my eyes. Tears rolled down my cheeks. "She's fine," the doctor said. "The heart is beating normally. There is a little stress, but right now, there is no threat." I cried, without holding back, without trying to be strong. Daniel leaned over to me and pressed his forehead against mine. "I told you so." But inside me, something changed. Forever. A few hours later, we were discharged home, with recommendations, with warnings, with the need for observation, but most importantly, with hope. The next day, everything became more real. Much more real. I got a call from the police. "We need your statement." I sat at the kitchen table, holding the phone, listening, and realizing this was no longer just a family conflict. This was a case, a criminal case. "Are you ready to give your testimony?" I looked at Daniel. He nodded silently. "Yes." When I hung up, my hands were shaking. "Are you sure?" he asked. I took a deep breath. If I don't do this, she will never stop. And it was the truth. 3 days later, I was back in that house. But everything was different. No balloons, no music, no guests, only Mom. And the silence. She looked older, more broken. "How are you?" she asked softly. "I'm fine." A pause. "The baby?" "Fine too." She closed her eyes and started to cry. I didn't know she was capable of this. I didn't answer, because I knew I had always known. It just had never been this obvious before. "Did you file the statement?" I nodded. And at that moment, something shifted in her gaze. Fear. Not for me. For Christina. "Maybe, can we somehow resolve this without court?" I slowly stood up. "She kicked me in the stomach, Mom." Silence. "She could have killed my baby." Mom looked down. "I cannot ignore this." I walked out without waiting for an answer. Because I knew, whatever choice she made, I had already made mine. A week later, the first court hearing took place. I didn't expect to see her like this. Christina sat in the courtroom. No makeup, no confidence, without the aggression that always accompanied her. She looked lost. But that changed nothing. When our eyes met, she looked away. For the first time in her life, the judge read out the case, and I listened, reliving that moment all over again. Every word, every second. When it was time to testify, I stood up. My legs were shaking. But my voice was not. I told them everything, clearly, calmly, without unnecessary emotion. Because this was no longer about the pain. It was about the truth, and about boundaries, the kind you must never cross. When I finished, silence hung over the room, and then the judge announced a recess. And at that moment, something I didn't expect happened. "Wait." I turned around. Christina was standing behind me. "Please." Her voice trembled. I didn't mean to. I looked at her. For a long time, and for the first time in all this time, I felt no anger, no hatred, only exhaustion. "But you did it," she started to cry. I was angry. I wasn't thinking. Exactly, a pause. And now I am thinking for 2. I turned around and walked away. Because some actions cannot be undone with words. The court session resumed 20 minutes later, but for me, it felt like a new life. I had already said everything I had to say. Now, all that was left was to wait. Christina didn't look in my direction anymore. She sat with her head down, squeezing her fingers so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her lawyer was whispering something to her, but she didn't seem to hear. The judge entered the room. Everyone stood up. The court continues the consideration of the case. From there, everything happened as if in a fog. Legal terms, facts, testimonies. Several people confirmed what had happened, even those who used to always take her side. The truth was too obvious. When it came time for the final statement, Christina stood up, slowly, unsteadily. Her voice shook. I am not asking for an acquittal. A pause. I am guilty. The room went quiet. I envied her my whole life. She looked at me. Her life, her choices, her strength. Tears streamed down her face, but that is no excuse. She looked down. I just ruined everything. I listened, and for the first time I realized one simple thing. She actually understood it. But it was too late. The judge retired to reach a verdict. Those 10 minutes were the longest of my life. I sat there, holding Daniel's hand. His fingers were warm, reliable, real. It will all end today, he said quietly. I nodded, and then the judge returned. The court, having considered all the circumstances of the case, my heart was beating too loudly, finds the defendant guilty. Christina closed her eyes, taking into account the nature of the crime and the condition of the victim. I squeezed Daniel's hand. Sentenced the defendant to a term of imprisonment of, a pause, 3 years probation, with mandatory psychological rehabilitation and a restraining order prohibiting approach to the victim. Silence. I exhaled, slowly, deeply. This wasn't revenge. This was a boundary. Christina was led out of the courtroom. She didn't resist, didn't scream. She only turned around for a second, and in her gaze there was everything. Regret, pain, and understanding. But I could no longer be the one to save her. This time I chose myself. Months passed, life was gradually returning, not the old life, but a new one, a more honest one. I still woke up sometimes at night, remembering that blow, that fear, that silence. But then I would feel a movement and smile. Labor began early in the morning. Daniel was there. As always, the pain was intense, but it wasn't scary anymore, because this time, it led to life. A few hours later, I heard a cry, the most beautiful sound in the world. You have a baby girl, the doctor said. They placed her on my chest, tiny, warm, alive. I cried. Hi, I whispered. I've been waiting for you. Daniel stood nearby, not hiding his tears. She's perfect. And in that moment, everything fell into place. Everything I went through, everything I lost, and everything I gained made sense. A week later, we returned home. A new house, a new life, new boundaries. Mom called, texted, asked to see her granddaughter. I didn't refuse, but I set conditions, clear ones, strict ones. And for the first time in her life, she accepted them. Christina never showed up again. Sometimes I thought about her, not with hatred, but as a person who made us and paid for it. But I made a choice too. And my choice is to protect my life, my child, my future. One evening, I sat by the window, holding my daughter in my arms. She was sleeping peacefully. The sunset light fell softly on her face. I ran a finger down her cheek. I promise you, I whispered, I will always protect you. And this time, I knew I could. Because strength isn't about enduring. It's about saying one day, enough.